What is up, all of my hot fat guys, gals, non-binary, and trans pals? I'm Alex Frankel, the CEO and founder of the Hot Fat Guy Club. Welcome to another episode of the Hot Fat Guy Club podcast and yet another hot fat chat with one of our wonderful members. I'm here with my new friend, Donald. Donald, I am so happy you're here today. We had an incredible time during our pre-show conversation going over what's going on. You have a lot happening in your life right now, including a very major life transition that you're going through. Tell us about this life transition that you are currently experiencing right now and why you're here today.
So it's happy and sad. It's the situation I'm in is I am going through a divorce, nearly final, marriage of 9 years, a relationship of about 12. She was the first long-term relationship that I was ever in, and I feel like that's important for me because it was just a lack of experience that happened along the way. But in any case, we're going through a divorce. We have a son. We have a lot of things that were settled and now are uprooted, and now we're resettling into a new life. One of those things for me is dating again. So part of the reason why we got a divorce was because I am bisexual, and for as long as I thought I could stuff it down and forget about it, as it turns out, I couldn't. Mm-hmm. I am bisexual, and that came out of me in a bad way. I shouldn't say a bad way. It came out of me uncontrollably, and I ended up having an affair with a man while married. And when I told my wife about it, I told her I was unhappy in the marriage and we had to split. And so here I am learning new things about myself that I have stuffed into a box, and this upheaval has created new things that I need to know. I have some experience, as you say, but there are some things that I have not had the experience of, and I need to learn about. And I'm hoping that through our conversation, I can learn some things, and maybe some other people who are in their late stages of their life and are going through upheaval can learn some things as well.
Well, Donald, I'm glad you're here, and thank you for sharing all of that with us. I am super excited to have this conversation because, like I told you before, you have the most life experience of anyone that we've had on the show so far, and you have the most real life circumstances of people who are dependent on you and things like that. And it's very exciting for me, one, that you would bring your vulnerability and honesty to the show, and I'm really excited to have these conversations. Also, welcome to the Late Bloomer Bisexual Club. We're glad to have you.
It's been fun. It's been a lot of fun having those experiences, but it's also been a little tricky in places sometimes.
I always harken back to that line that Oberyn Martell says in season 4 of Game of Thrones, when they're in the brothel and they ask him about sleeping with men as well, and he was like, why deprive yourself of half of the world's pleasure? And I was just like, back when they could still fucking write that show. My God.
When they actually gave a damn about that show.
Yeah, I could scream about that for the whole episode. Let's not get into it, but we'll do a follow-up episode with that. But it's something that's very interesting to me about your story and just in general is I am polyamorous. I am a bisexual. I'm a late bloomer bisexual. I am polyamorous. And one of the reasons why I came to those conclusions about myself and why I have the lifestyle that I do is, one, because of so many of the examples that I have seen throughout my life of why relationships have failed, why people have done unintentionally hurtful things to other people. And part of that was because of their inability to be honest and communicate with themselves about who they really are and what they really wanted from their life, from their partner, from people outside of their partners, and seeing the unintended consequences of that so often throughout my life, number one. And number two, having a deeper understanding of human nature and why monogamy exists and where it all came from and how we kind of societally ended up where we are, where women's value changed in society to where now, in feudal societies and things like that, fathers were selling off their daughters for land or property or this shit, that shit. And that's a whole other thing that we can get deeper into. But it's incredible. We're human beings. We exist, in my opinion, we exist to do 3 things: to care for each other, to feed each other, and to fuck each other.
And some of those things are all rolled into one.
Yes, correct. And it is our human nature to seek out companionship. It is our human nature to seek out We can't fault ourselves for who we are or what we want. Now, granted, there are when we have certain life responsibilities, we do have a responsibility to the feelings of other people around us, but we can't fault ourselves for being who we are or wanting what we want, right?
Yes.
And go ahead.
I was just gonna say, on my journey for this, it really started with therapy. I will say is that when we had our son, he would start to, when he got to be about 2 or 3 years old, he started doing toddler things, right? He acted up. He did what toddlers do. He's testing boundaries. He's figuring out life and all this stuff. And I had anger issues, right? I couldn't control the situation, so I got mad. Right. And I was like, I can't do this, because I was turning into my dad, because this is what he did. Right? I had seen the other side of this tale before, and I was like, no, this is not happening again. So I found a therapist and very quickly learned how to deal with anger, right? And that started this whole process of working on myself and figuring out who I was. And that very literally led to, I'm unhappy. These are the reasons why I'm unhappy. And I just had shoved so many things on. And so when you say the things about what we do, for me at least, a lot of the anger and hate was directed inward. And I had to uncover these things slowly over time and realize, okay, we have to deal with these things appropriately, or this is going to come out of me in giant upheavals that are going to hurt people around me. Like, yes, I hurt my wife when I got a divorce, but I saved my son because I have grown up in a loveless marriage before, and all of these things, like, I did not want to put my son through these things. I did not want him to see an angry parent. I did not want him to see two parents who didn't love each other anymore. So I did this for me, but another reason why I did was because he needed the more stability than he was going to get in these relationships. So when you talk about these things, like, you have to start with yourself, right? You cannot help, and it's the cliche, right? You can't love anyone unless you love yourself, right? Yeah. In a very cliche way, that's true, but it's deeper in the fact of love and hate of yourself, right? And of other people externally. And it's a very complicated issue. I would just say that you have to, I'll say for me, I won't say for anybody else, but for me, I had to learn to accept myself for who I was. And that included all of me. And so I had to take myself out of a box and start exploring myself. And that led in a lot of different directions. And that led me to be a more caring person as well, as you were saying, like, care for people and be with people. Like, I used to be a conservative. I used to be a hateful person, like, for no reason at all, just because I was told to be. Fear these people, hate these people. They're less than you are. Why should they have the things that you have? No. And now I'm like, dude, I can't even begin to tell you the number of people that I have met, that I like, that I don't want to say love, because love is too strong, but I've, like, felt passionately about these people. And people I don't even know anymore, but, like, just be a good person. Start there. It doesn't have to be any more complicated than that, right? People try to make it so complicated, all these things. Like, be a good person to yourself and to others, and a lot of things will figure themselves out along the way when you do those kinds of things. You know what I'm saying? Yes.
So good on you for going to therapy. There really is this inflection point where you start to imagine you're sitting at a loom, right? And you're weaving a blanket or a tapestry or something. And when you start to look through the tapestry that is your life, and you start to see the individual threads of why you feel a certain way, or why you reacted to a certain situation one way, or like why, the first little granule of why you're unhappy, and you start to pull on it, and it starts to unravel everything else, and you see how interconnected it all is, and how much pain that you are causing yourself because of your inability to admit something to yourself, or because you're resisting what you know the truth is. And it is very difficult to come to those places and admit that to yourself. It takes a lot of time. And there is this correlation that I've seen in my own life and in the lives of many people around me who, especially in like psychedelic communities, once you have that first, once the door opens for the first time, the floodgates open, and it's very difficult to not see everything else. And then, speaking from my own experience, when I had that realization that I've talked about on this show before and on my social media, that when the reason why all of my relationships were dysfunctional, my professional, personal, my romantic relationships were dysfunctional, was because my relationship with myself was the most dysfunctional. And when I started to really lean into that and push on that pain and figure out why that was the case, and then I started to see all of the other things, like it enters you into this almost multi-year process of dealing with all of these things from your past and healing your relationship with yourself to allow you to be your most authentic version of you. And it's the hardest work in the world, but it's also the most rewarding work. And especially when you're a parent, that is something that is so fucking important, because I was a preschool teacher for almost 10 years. I worked I worked in the home almost exclusively with young families. And I had the privilege of, because I did this for so long and because I worked in people's homes, I would start with their oldest kid, and then I would work with all of the rest of their kids. There was one family in particular, I taught all 3 of their children, and I worked with them for all 7 years. I tutored them, and I went from the twins. I started teaching their oldest sister when she was barely 3. She was like 2.9, right? And the twins were not even a year old, and I would walk in and they would be, sitting in diapers, watching God knows what on the TV, asleep in the living room, whatever. And now the son is the best chess player of all of them, and like we've developed this really cool relationship, and we're still friends and all of this. And you get to see, you get to watch generational curses pass through to people in real time. You get to see the effect of like parents who have really done the work on themselves and how that ends up affecting the children into them being really authentic, fearless people. And you get to watch their personalities wither away the older they get, as there's more pressure put onto them, especially with parents who aren't around often or have not put in the work to really get to know themselves. And something that is forgotten a lot is that they're always watching and they're always absorbing everything. And what you said before about, I don't want to be my father, is really important, because, you're here at 39 only now having the opportunity to lean into who you, Donald, really want to be at this point in your life, when this could have happened for you in your 20s. And everything happens at the right time, at the time it's supposed to, right? But partially because of the experiences that you had with your parents and the fact that you only ever got to see your father in his angry mode, now you're like, I'm not going to pass that along to my child. And you're doing the work to be your most authentic self. And that will matter a lot to your son when he's older. It may not seem like it now, but it really fucking will. So kudos to you for doing that.
This is the thing, right? So like so I've mentioned before that I was a conservative before. Like I was a Glenn Beck loving conservative in 2015.
Wow.
Then somebody got elected, and all of the bullshit that people talk about just went right out the window because a certain orange person got elected, right? And so I was like, okay, if that's true, then what else is going on, right? So it was a domino effect, one domino effect. And I will actually give my wife total credit for this. She was the one and only person who could say a specific question to me. And I can't even remember the question, but I remember it started with a question. And she's like, well, what if this is true, then what about this? And I'm like, and then one led to another, and then another. And then I started seeking other sources of information, and so on, and so on, and so on. Until today, I am a socialist who is a gentle parent to my son, right? Like, it is the change that I have seen in my life from, that's 8 years, 8 years, right? In 8 years, the change is so incredible that my family is like, who are you? What happened? Like,
growth is possible, folks.
It absolutely is. All right. But like, it was one of the reasons I wanted to do this, was because I wanted other people to know that you are not locked in. I don't care if you're in your late 30s. I don't care how old you are. You are not locked into this. Tomorrow is a new fucking day. I I am learning how to draw. All right, I've wanted to learn how to draw all my life. Right, I just never did it because I was like, I'm not good at it, whatever. I was like, fuck this shit. I'm gonna get a tutor and I'm gonna start to learn how to draw. I'm doing it. It's fun. It's great. I'm 39 years old. What am I gonna do? Don't care. I'm gonna have fun. That's what I'm gonna do. Right? And it just unlocks so much. And my son, as you say, can see this, right? We draw together, we do this stuff together, and I can be here for my son in the way that I want to be. I don't want to be an angry person with my son. I'm very rarely angry with my son. I don't have to be because he's a kid. What is he gonna do? He's experimenting with life. He's doing exactly what it's the cutest thing ever, actually. It's like he wants to do everything himself. Even if he physically can't quite do it yet, he wants to do it all by himself. Okay, bet. Go for it. Pour your own milk. Get in and out of the car by yourself. Do these things, but I was like, I don't have to, I would push, I see all these videos of parents pushing kids to do stuff. I'm like, no, they want to do it all by themselves. You just have to not say no the first 30 times, right?
Yeah.
We bake cookies together. He does half of it by himself because I didn't tell him no when we first started doing it. Young
children. Go ahead.
I want to shout this out because I'm so proud of this kid sometimes, all the time, but especially for this one because it's so much fun. He loves Legos, right? Every time I get him, we go and buy a box of Legos and he builds it. The last one he built, I can pull it over, it was a Star Wars Lego. Do you know what the age rating on it was? 18 plus.
Oh, wow.
He did it by himself. He's 5. I'm so incredibly proud of my son in this way. He's such an amazing kid. Anyway, I could go on and on about this forever and ever and ever and ever. But the only way that's possible is because we help him become that person.
Young children do not get, I'm talking 5 and below. Really that 3 to 5 age range. Really do not get the credit that they deserve for how intelligent and capable they are. The issue is not that they do not have the intelligence and capacity to do things. It's fine motor skills and context. They don't know anything because they don't fucking know anything. Because they've only existed for 3, 4, 5 years. They're brand new. But they absorb information and they can pick things up so quickly. I actually saw a tweet yesterday about these self-directed learning crunchy homeschool moms and the disservice that they are doing to their children by having them do anti-school because they are missing out on the neuroplasticity of their young children's minds that they have in these moments, and by not putting them through the process of schooling at that age. This mom showed this notebook of her kid. She was like, my son wants to write. He's 6 years old. And his letter formation is terrible. He's barely writing words and all these things. Whereas I knew 6-year-olds who were writing full sentences when I was working with them. I had 3-year-olds writing chess notation and playing full games of chess. And it's just you're in fact doing them a disservice, and they will resent you in their later years because you did not, they will be behind the rest of their peers because you're not taking advantage of how absolutely brilliant they are at such a young age. And it's very fascinating how many parents I've seen underestimate their children's capability and their intelligence purely because they are 3 years old or 4 or 5. And when you just give them the space to attempt, there are obviously some things that you should keep your kids from doing, don't stick a fork in the electrical socket,
Don't play with scissors.
Right. But there are other things of you want to try this? Go ahead. And, let them try and fail on their own. It will really make a difference. And also it's so fascinating. So I am obviously not a psychologist or a psychiatrist, but because of what I hope to do with the Hot Fat Guy Club and the things that I talk about, I do a ton of research. And there's a person who I'm quite frankly obsessed with, and I hope to have him on the show one day. His name is Dr. Ronald Levant, and he is my hero. I first discovered his work when I was listening to an episode of Therapy Chat by Laura Regan, and they were talking about men and masculinities and boyhood. And one of the things that he talked about that was super fascinating to me is how emotion socialization plays into young boys and men, and how we end up being in our 20s, 30s, 40s, having never felt any emotions other than anger or sadness, right? Because those are really just anger. The only acceptable emotion for us as men to have is rage or anger. And so much of that comes into our fathers or the other people in our lives making us feel like the gender roles that have been set out for us in society are obligatory. You know, there was a story that he told, for example, of this man that he worked with in the Boston University Fatherhood Institute who couldn't cry, who couldn't feel his emotions. And they ended up getting to this story of where when he was 3 years old, he got hurt on a playground or something, and he went to go hold his baby blanket and cry. And his stepfather literally burned the blanket for him because he was like, "You're not a baby anymore. You can't cry. Men don't cry." This child was 3 years old. And that was an indelible memory that was stuck in his memory for the rest of his life. And that idea of having this masculinity forced upon us, and having worked in preschools for as long as I did, seeing how unintentional it is because our children are always watching, right? How these gender roles end up playing out in a school setting is fascinating, because like the boys play with the boys and the girls play with the girls, and there's not much overlap in the middle. And it's just so fascinating how that, you know, it happens so early, and it's just unbelievable how it then plays into how fucked men are now.
Yeah, and they don't, and that's the other thing too, is like anger is the only emotion that we're allowed to have as men, right? Or the quote unquote the masculine, to be masculine you must be rage filled, blah blah blah. But there's no outlet for it,
Yeah.
right? There's no place for it to go that is productive. It's just you have to be angry and break stuff, which is not helpful in any way at all. Like, and this was my problem, right? I had this anger. It was the only thing I was allowed to have, and it would come out of me. And I will say, like, okay, I'm going to be very careful about the way that I say this, because I despise myself for the feeling that I had for this, even though I never acted on it. When my son would act out, before I had sought therapy, when he was 2-3 years old, right? I was like, I'm going to hit him.
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna get him to stop what he's doing by hitting him.
Yeah.
Right. This was a thought in my head, and I didn't do it, but I was so close.
Yeah.
And that was the part in my mind where I was like, okay, no, absolutely fucking not. What is this? What's going on? Why? And then went down this other way. But it's that, right? It's that version of masculinity where you can't be sad. You can't be happy, for fuck's sake. You're not allowed to be happy. You have to keep working, grind, be angry and afraid. Angry and afraid, right? Because Lord forbid that someone is scared of showing some kind of emotion to somebody else, or doing anything outside the box if somebody thinks less of you for any reason whatsoever. Fuck them. But it's just like, we're stuck in this box, but you aren't actually, right? You are only there because someone who's dead told you to be there, right?
Yes.
I love this one. This is one of my all-time favoriteest things ever. Somebody said was, traditions is peer pressure by dead people. Right? I love this saying. It is amazing, right? So
that's a good one.
Is literally, if you're like, and I will say it comes up because of my work a lot, right? I work in the semiconductor business, right? There are a lot of rules, there are a lot of procedures, there's a lot of things that we do, but a lot of this stuff has been there because that's just the way it's always been done, right? Never mind the fact that it doesn't make any sense, it doesn't do anybody any good, so why don't we do it different? Well, we've always done it this way. And that's literally what it is. I feel like myself for myself, but also for men in general, is like, we've been told we have to be this way. No, we don't. Who the fuck says we have to be that way? You can be it any way you want to, right? I'm trying all different kinds of stuff. Why not? Who's going to tell me no?
What was the experience like when you first started going to therapy, and when you started to be more opened up by your therapist to your emotions and how you were feeling, why you were feeling them? Tell me more about that process, and what were the difficulties that you faced, especially in the initial phase of that? What was that like?
So I was very receptive to therapy at the beginning because I sought it out for a very specific purpose, right? So I was very receptive for the therapist to tell me, like, to show me things and to be like, okay, let's do this. And I will say that my first therapist I went to for 2 years, and the only thing that she really helped with was to recognize that I was having emotions, right? And to allow me to have those emotions.
Okay. So, and this is something that I'm super interested in because for many men, that is extraordinarily difficult.
Yeah.
Ronald Levant calls it the normative male alexithymia hypothesis. And what that is that men do not have the vocabulary to perceive or explain what their or other people's emotions are. There's a story that he tells in that same podcast that I listen to it like every week almost just to keep all these stories fresh in my mind. At this point, I've nearly memorized it. But he tells a story about this man at the Boston University Fatherhood Institute who was about to have his first child. And he felt no emotions at all about this child. and okay, so this is interesting because I'm glad we're talking about this then. And they spent a lot of time trying to figure out what was happening. Why was he so emotionless about this very exciting thing? And they ended up doing a lot of role play and they got into his backstory. And what they had found out was that his father was a ball turret gunner in World War II.
Okay, like in an airplane ball turret gunner?
Yes, in either a B-17 or a B-29. The dude in the teeny tiny little turret at the bottom of the airplane.
The life expectancy is like nil for those.
Yeah, and just raging PTSD. And his father never left the war, right?
Right.
And his father lived in a small town, I think in New Jersey or something, and his father was the editor of the local newspaper. And this man, in an effort to get closer to his father, became the editor of his high school paper. And he would look for all of these opportunities to like reach out and connect to his dad and would get completely shot down every time. And he ended up being so full of, and finally when he became the editor of his high school paper, he told his dad, he tried to use that as an opportunity to connect with them. And his dad was like, fuck you, and completely shut him out basically. And that was essentially the end of their relationship. And he was, he had internalized so much of that fear and that broken relationship with his father that it very much played into his fear of becoming a father and becoming his own father and things like that. And they only worked together for a few months, I think, but eventually Dr. Levant tells a story that he got a letter after the baby was born, thanking him for all the work, and they said in the letter, and he even looked Scottish. They were Scottish, Scottish descent, and it was just this really beautiful story of finding the reason why we can't feel those emotions, and the reason why we feel this anger and this rage, and why we've shut ourselves off from what should be one of the most exciting things we've ever felt. And once you can kind of connect the dots on that, you can open yourself up to how you really want to feel about it. And there was another story about this guy who came into one of their meetings at the Boston University Fatherhood Institute who had gotten really angry that his son had canceled a plan on him. And they were like, okay, let's role play this. And the guy was really angry, and they're going back and forth trying to figure out what he was feeling. And all he could say, all he had the words for was, I guess I was disappointed. Versus if you compare that to their female counterpart, if you compare that to a mother, it would be like, well, at first I was really disappointed and angry because I had planned my whole day around this, but then I started to get worried, like, what if I said something? What if I did something? And then, and I'm kind of scared, like, did I hurt them? Are they mad at me? This or that? And they can identify all of these different emotions, not only in themselves, but in the other person. And like, why is it so difficult for men to not only feel what they are feeling or even verbalize what they're feeling, but to see what other people are? And he literally started making people like come up with walk around with index cards of emotions and what it felt like in their bodies, and when they felt something, to like remove themselves from the situation and like go through and be like, oh, it's that I feel trepidation, or I feel fear, I feel sadness.
So there's so much here. All right. So yes, when I first started going to therapy, it gave me very much a vocabulary for the things that I was going through. And just putting words to the thing allowed me to identify it and recognize it and move through it, right? Which was a huge step for me. Then that therapist kind of slowed down for me. So I switched up therapists, which is something you should do.
Yes.
If you're not getting the thing out of therapy, is that you should up your game. So
they are your employee. You
yes,
can decide not to continue working with them respectfully, but
of course, respectfully, but still. So the other thing is that I started going to co-parenting therapy, which brought up a whole different thing because that became therapy in the context of a relationship.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing that happened to me every single time the situation got emotionally charged, I shut down. I withdrew because that's what I've always done. Always. That's the fight or flight thing, or like for me, it's freeze, right? I mean, I just lock up. Like I just will disengage from the conversation, which is exactly what I shouldn't be doing when we're having an argument, right? But in any case, so I started going to see another therapist to specifically delve into me and my lacking, the things that I was lacking as a person and as a man, right? Because I had gone through some other relationship stuff and that one hurt a lot. But then we started doing meditation, very short meditation, right? And it was very tactile in the way that like, do you feel pressure in your chest? Do you feel pressure in your shoulders? Why is there pressure in your shoulders? What's going on? What is your body telling you, right? Again, putting vocabulary and practices in place that will tell you what's happening with your body. Because I guarantee you, if you're having an emotion, you're going to feel it in your body some way, somehow. Elevated heart rate, tension, flustered. The one for me was, if I was in my own head and I was going over something that was painful in my mind, I'd be like, it doesn't matter. And I would just push it aside, right? I wouldn't go into it. I would just push it away. This forced me to think about it like, okay, no, stop. What are you feeling right now? Why are you feeling it that way? And it's okay to feel those things, right? You're disappointed. Yes. That is a very human thing to do, as I have found out, right? It's okay to feel those things. It's okay to be that way. If I am sad when I don't see my son every day, right? It was a very recent thing that I had come to grips with, was that I'm sad when I don't see him every day. I'm sad right now because I haven't seen him today, right? That's fine. It sucks, right? But this is the life that I have chosen, and I miss him, and I'm sad that I don't see him. But I don't push it away anymore. I don't hide it anymore. I don't push it into a box so that I don't feel it anymore. I don't want to. I need that to come out because it's the only way to live for me right now. I can't push that stuff away anymore.
Well, that's it's a great example that you're setting for your son as well, especially when you can see that their father is able to feel emotion and there's a balance to be struck with that as well, right? Where I do think it's very important for parents or for children to see their parents experience the gamut of what it is to be human. Like I had a conversation with a millionaire parents one time where they're like, I don't understand why he's so afraid to fail, and I was like, and why he has to be so perfect all the time. I was like, well, have they ever seen you fail at anything? And there's a balance, right? Where like I never saw my father cry. That's and it's when they're really young, like you don't necessarily want to show them that much, but you do want to show them that like it's okay to cry, it's okay to be sad, it's okay to be to feel grief and things like that. You want to show them the gamut of emotions other than just anger or happiness. There's so much in between all of that.
And one of the great things about that is like when I have my son, he will want something. Invariably, like, sorry, kid, not today. We're not having it, and he will get upset.
Yeah,
he will cry. He will do all those things. And I'm like, I'll hug him. I'll hug him through the whole thing. He stubs his toe or whatever. Like, I know it's not. Some people call it like babying or coddling or whatever. But like, no, he is in pain. I am helping him through the pain, and it works off as I'm like, no, I don't ever tell him, no, don't cry. It's not that big of a deal. You're fine. Like, it's never that. It's like, you're upset. Okay, we're going to be right here while you're upset. Okay. When he starts to throw fists, like, no, we're not throwing fists. We never throw fists. No tablet for a little while because you threw fists. Right. that's the boundary, right? Emotions are never something that I'm ever going to be like, no, don't ever show those, right? Like, no, yes, you have those. We're going to deal with these emotions together if necessary.
Right.
You just can't be physical with it, right?
Yeah.
And that's the part that men were never taught, right? There's no outlet for the emotions that are there. Like, suppress all the emotions, but the emotions that you do have, we're not going to show you a proper way to deal with them either, right?
Well, and I mean that
just
plays into, you know, when we have emotions that come up that make us feel inadequate. There's a lot of men that attempt to dominate others in order to make themselves feel better about themselves, which is then where we end up with cases of domestic violence, emotional abuse, just abuse in general,
fascism.
and that's I talk about this all the time, but that's a good segue into
small men trying to kick down at segue into other things. But yeah, it's the reason why. Another reason why I fell out of conservatism is I was just no longer interested in kicking down at other people, being afraid or angry at other people, because there's no. We are the same. Like, what we're human. What are we gonna do? Like.
Well, it's interesting that you say that, because that leads me into my next point, and the connection between fascism, nationalism, and traditional masculinity ideology, and how that the TMI scale specifically gives us a lot of insight into why we're in the place that we're in the world right now. So traditional masculinity ideology has 7 pillars. Number 1 is the resistance to all things feminine. Number 2 is the restriction of the expression of caring or vulnerable emotions. Number 3 is toughness. 3 through 6 are toughness, dominance, self-sufficiency, or self-reliance, a super high interest in sex in the way where, like, you're the Hugh Hefner way, where you see women more as objects as opposed to people. And the last is disdain or hatred for gender, racial, or sexual identity minorities. And how much of that sounds familiar to all of our manosphere, far-right fascist dude bros and all of these other people that are, in my opinion, actively attempting to make the world a shittier place. And there's so much time spent trying to dominate others in order to make ourselves feel superior. Whereas, it's that wonderful Bell Hooks quote of how patriarchy hurts everybody, including the men that are the ones that are enacting it, because they have narrowed their worldview just to minuscule purview where we're not allowed to have real emotional expressions, and so then we go and kill 6 million fucking people, right? I applaud you for having the conservatism. In many ways is a very well run cult, and it is very difficult to pull yourself out of it, and I applaud you. And this is one of my goals, is to create a platform within the Hot Fat Guy Club where we are able to promote positive male role models, and we're able to be the antidote to the Jordan Petersons, the Ben Shapiros, the Andrew Tates, the Joe Rogans, the Glenn Becks, and the Josh Hollies of the world, where we can show that there are so many other ways to be a man other than this very narrow view, and that we do not have to spend nearly as much time worrying about what other people think, what other people do, what other people want to do, who they want to love, who they want to be, how they want to express their identities. What we really need to focus on is making sure that everyone's basic needs are met, versus trying to control every aspect of everyone's lives. And I want to be a person who is able to, and I'm so glad that you're on the show right now, is like, you're the prime example of, you can get yourself out of that mindset. You can become a reformed, not to say that you were an incel, but you can become a reformed incel. You can become a reformed far right-wing nut job. You can, just as easily as it is to fall down that rabbit hole. Well, it's not easy, but you can, as easily as you can fall down that rabbit hole. It takes work to get yourself out of it, but it can happen. It is possible.
So so there's a podcast that I like to listen to. It's called Last Podcast on the Left. I don't know if you've ever heard of it.
I've heard a couple episodes.
And so they do a lot of true crime stuff and a lot of out there stuff like aliens and stuff like that. But one of the things that they also do is episodes on cults, right? specific cults and the things that happen to them. And the thing that comes up over and over and over and over and over again in all these cult things is that the people who run the cults are the problem, right? The people who are in the cults, they're simply bad people on bad times, right? Most times in a bad phase of their life, who are susceptible to a really charismatic person, and then they were in for a penny, in for a pound, right? And they couldn't get out of it for whatever reason. And it's really hard to get people out of a cult because they got family now, right? For whatever that is, they got purpose, right? And so, especially when it comes to specifically the right-wing people that follow Andrew Tate or any one of these other grifters, right? I don't blame them so much. I feel like I pity them more than anything else.
They're looking for the answers to problems that they don't understand how to deal with themselves.
Yes, right.
And
I blame Andrew Tate. I blame the grifters, the people on top, for perpetuating this nonsense. They're the people who, I don't know what you do with them. I don't know if well, Andrew Tate's going to go to jail, hopefully, quickly, soon. But anyway,
we'll see.
God. But all of them. I mean, Trump is the easiest example, right? It's literally dear leader, cult of personality through and through. The next Hitler. I have no problem calling him the next Hitler because it's literally like this. It's like failed person who has a charismatic personality and fails his way all the way to the top and is helped along the way by people who want a bit of his power. Like, write the book again. Like, there it is. Like, right? It's not. The one thing I will say is that to get people out of a cult or to get a family member or a person out of, like, they have to believe you, right? They have to. It's not. Believe is the wrong word. They have to respect what you say, right? That's how I got out of it. I respected what my wife said at the time. I respected her opinion. And it allowed me the space to move in that direction and slowly over time get there. Someone has to respect that person. The cult person has to respect the voice of somebody else. And you're not, and this is one thing I will say, like, you're not going to get a person out of a cult by berating them, right? That's only going to cause them to go deeper. And it's one of the reasons why, I don't want to say you and I, but like men like us have to be slow with other people, and ourselves included, to help foster and get them out. You cannot punch them down and back into it. They'll just fall right back. They'll fall further into the cult and never come out.
A big part of it, and this is something that I have struggled with, is knowing who to invest that time and energy into. And they're like my brother. I love my brother, but it is not worth investing that time or energy into trying to change him. I'm not going to change his mind. Also, he's a lawyer, and he's one of few people in the world that I will admit is theoretically smarter than me. And he's a lawyer. I'm never going to win that argument. I've tried. I failed. I'm done. There are other people, like, it is not lost on me, and I've talked about this on the show and on my social media before, how easily I could have fallen down that incel far-right rabbit hole, and how much my views on things have changed, and how much, like, disdain and hatred for other people and other people's ideologies and the way they decide to live their life purely comes from not understanding it. And if you don't have exposure to people who live differently from you, you're not going to understand why they're choosing to live that way. And with the internet, the way that it is currently set up, and the fact that far right content is able to hijack social media algorithms so well because of all of the rage that it incites from all of this as well, and is able to just go super viral as a result of it. And the fact that, men are lonely, boys are lonely, and human connection is in the real world is happening less and less. When you have that, like, one bad experience, like when you ask a girl out for the first time and she laughs in your face and goes, haha, yeah, right. Of course you're going to go to the internet, to YouTube, to TikTok, to Twitter, wherever, and you're gonna look for something to confirm that what you are feeling is correct. And then you're going to fall down the rabbit hole of all women are terrible and evil and, blah, 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 all these things. So this is an awkward, clunky transition, but let's talk about your re-entering the dating pool. And what that is like for you as a newly divorced bisexual man at a later phase in life with a 5-year-old son. What has your experience in the dating world been like so far? What are the things that you feel like you're doing well? What are the things you feel like you need help with?
So, re-entering the dating pool has been exciting and scary all at the same time. That kind of makes sense. It very much started with dating apps because it was a very simple, easy way to get started. And obviously meeting people who are already ready to mingle, right? Like that's just easy. I've gone on some dates with some men and some women, some non-binary, some transgender. It's been on the whole, it's been a lot of fun. I'm not gonna lie. Like it's been a lot of fun. There's been a lot of things that I am very glad that I have done. Now my main problem is that I want to do in person, right? I have no, like, when I know that I'm talking to someone who is interested in me, that's easy, right? I can have a conversation. I can be a normal person. And I can also be very upfront with people with like, hey, I have this situation going on, right? We're casual. I'm not, we're doing this thing and we're going to talk about what it is that we want from this relationship and how we're going to do it going forward. And I've had this talk quite a few times with people, and that has been very productive. My main thing is like when I am just out and about in the real world, I want to talk to people. I'm like, hey, you seem really cool. You're very attractive. I like your, it's usually tattoos. I'm a big tattoo person. I've got several, and actually it's a great way to like, it's the one way that I know to talk to somebody about like something else. Is like, can I see your tattoos? Your tattoos look amazing, right? Tell me. And everybody loves talking about that tattoos. So I got that one, right? But how to like feel someone out when they're like, okay, we've talked about tattoos. I'm ready to move on with my day because I'm not that into you. Or they are, but I don't know how to read it, right? And that's been my main like crux, because I don't want to like overstay it because like, oh, we were talking about tattoos. Let's keep going. And the next thing, and the next thing, and the next thing, and the next thing. But they're like, no, I'm really not. I really don't want to talk to you anymore. But because of societal norms or etiquette, or because I'm a man and she's a woman, she feels like she can't or anything like that because she's afraid of what I might do, even though I know, and this is the part that breaks my heart, is like, I know that if a woman was like, get gone, but like, okay, I'm moving. I'm not sticking around. Like, I value myself enough now that I'm not going, like, it will hurt, right? But not for very long. And if it wasn't meant to be, it wasn't meant to be. Like, I am so like comfortable in like, do you have any idea how many dates I've gotten off a Hinge because I've told people that I like singing Disney songs? I'm not even gonna lie. Like I wanted to say that here because so many times I feel like I did this for the longest time. People try to force themselves into what they think other people will like, and that hurts everything from the start. Like, dude, just be yourself. Be your nerdy self. The people that like that will find you. And if you like, I kid you not, like a prompt on Hinge is like, what's a green flag about you? I like singing 90s Disney songs. Got more hits than anything else. Swear to God.
It's funny you say that because my go-to, this is a long time ago, my go-to Tinder line when I still use Tinder regularly was Lion King or Aladdin. Don't worry, there is a right answer.
Okay.
And of course, the right answer the right answer was always the opposite one of what they said, because then we could have like the fun little play argument
conversation.
Yeah, because low-key, my favorite Disney movie is neither of those.
Which is it?
I mean, probably Monsters Inc. But
I'm sorry, say that again.
Monsters Inc. But that's more Pixar. Okay. More Pixar than Disney. I don't know. What is my favorite Disney movie? I
got my answer.
Hercules.
Oh, Hercules. Amazing.
Hercules
awesome.
has the funniest bit of any Disney movie ever when they're in Rome or Thebes or whatever city they go to, and the dude in the trench coat comes up to him and he's like,
"Oh, right.
Hey, you want to buy a sundial?" That is the funniest fucking joke.
Mine is a Goofy movie, all day, every day.
Yep.
The music in it is second to none, and I relate to Max in so many ways from when I was a kid. But anyway, so long story. All those things are fun, but how do I translate that to an in-person experience at like a Starbucks? Or better yet, I go to the same gas station over and over and over and over again, and there's an attendant there who she and I have, I don't want to say a banter, but we talk to each other, every week and that kind of a thing. And I'm like, she's kind of cute. Like, maybe I should just ask her if she'll take my number, that kind of a thing. But like, but I have this thing against, because I've been told not to bother women when they're at work, because they're stuck, they can't say no, they do all these things. But at the same time, I'm like, to this woman, I'm like, and I try to make it as explicitly clear as possible. Like, listen, I'm going to give you my number. Call, don't call. I don't care. You want to go on a date? Boom. I move on. And it never went anywhere. And that's fine. But it's also at the same time, I'm like, is that creepy? Should I not do that? And so this is where I am right now with meeting people in public, kind of a thing.
So, okay. When your intentions are coming from a pure place and you already acknowledge the potential pressure the other party might be feeling when you put them in a situation of asking them out, right? You're already ahead of the game of most people. You're not automatically expecting something in return for them. You don't feel entitled to their time, to their body, to their whatever. There absolutely is an art to the cold approach, but I think the key is, one, in how you handle the rejection, and two, being deliberate, right? At the end of the day, we are all, regardless of how many people you are surrounded by, we're all lonely. We're all looking for connection. We're all looking to be loved, to be cared for, to be fed, to be fucked. Some people more than others. And I think that there's a certain threshold where, like, if you see a person consistently enough in a setting where, yes, there is banter, there is, a certain back and forth, like this gas station attendant, I think you can go a more casual route of be like, hey, let's be Instagram friends and get the social media. And then that way there's still kind of a barrier between the two, but you can use that to open up the floodgates of communication a little bit. Or you can be like, oh, let me, what's your Instagram? Let's add each other, and then I'll send you my number. Maybe we can hang out sometime. And when you're in other like more innocuous social setting, like, there are of course signs. There are certain just like physical body language signs that when you're flirting with people are good ways to tell if they're like interested or not. Like if they're touchy with you, if they play with their hair. Those are by no means like scientific, like, oh, if she touches her hair, she wants to fuck you. No, but it is, there's you can notice patterns in an accumulation of, if it keeps happening, or if they're reaching out and touching you, then I think that's a good enough opening of being like, okay, I'm going to take the risk and I'm going to say, hey, would you like to go do XYZ thing sometime? And at the end of the day, the worst thing you can do or the worst thing that can happen is you just ask, and if they're not interested, they say no. It is such a rare, so few people in the world are good at flirting in person now, and even have the emotional fortitude to take the risk of asking someone out. It is so rare that even just doing that on this will be something that sticks out to people. And this is what I've told everyone that's been on the show do, is you've got to get really good at talking to strangers, and you've got to start conversations with you've got to start at least one random conversation with a totally random stranger every day, because then you start to pick up on just like other social cues that we all kind of do, of whether or not someone wants to be part of this conversation, or whether, just the more you get good at talking to people and having random conversations and getting good at making people feel wanted or cared for, or asking questions, or if they aren't interested in the conversation and you're able to move on, you just need more practice doing it. And then you'll start to pick up a little bit more about whether or not people are into it. And sometimes there is just the matter of having that blind confidence and taking the dive, not knowing how deep the water is.
It's, oh man. So it's, The fun part for me is that I am an extrovert,
Mm-hmm.
right? So I feed off of talking to people. Like
Mm-hmm.
I have so much fun talking to people just regularly, right? And that has been very good in all manner of social settings. So when I'm at a gathering or a party, or it was the one of the people I'm seeing, she's in a band, and so I went to one of her shows, right? She's up there doing one of her friends' shows, and I'm like, I'm just talking to people, and it's fabulous, right? Don't know that it's going. It actually doesn't even matter if anything is going anywhere, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like just talking to people is fun in and of itself. It's just I'm trying to cultivate like, and as you say, it's probably mostly just an experience thing. And I never, even before I was married, man, can I tell you how socially awkward this nerd was when he was in middle school and high school? Like, incredibly, terribly so. I have an incredibly embarrassing story if you want to hear it. But
Bring
anyway,
it.
um, okay, you want it?
Hit it.
So this was actually, so I was in the Marines, and I was on leave. My cousin was getting married. Now she and I had, our families had gotten a lot together, so we had a lot of experiences together as kids. So she's getting married, and they open up the mic for stories about the bride and groom, right, or about the bride or the groom. And so I'm like, I have this really cute story about when we were kids, and our dads would chase us around with snowballs, and how that can be like life. And I'm glad you found someone to get chased by somebody with, throwing snowballs at you through life and to help you and all this stuff. And as soon as I got done with the story, every single woman in the audience went like that. And I was like, I did not realize what I had just done right there, right? Like literally, like every woman was like, oh, that's so cute. Dance floor opens up, right? And the electric slide comes on and I go, because I'm a white boy and I can only dance to electric slide. Forget everything else. Just forget it. I suddenly am surrounded by just about all of the young women,
Mm-hmm.
right? Didn't even realize at the time what was happening, right? And I'm wearing, a suit coat and all this stuff. And the collar had got like popped up a little bit. So I kind of did one of these numbers to like bring it down, like while I'm in the middle of the desk. He's like, oh yeah, that's so hot and all that. I was like, no. And I lean in and the loud music. I'm like, no, I was just fixing my collar. And then after that, nothing. And everybody just disappeared. I was like, and it wasn't like until like a week later where I was like, oh my God, if I'd have just shut my mouth and not said anything, I probably would have had a phone number by the end of that party.
So this brings up a very good point to where it and I think this is something that a lot of us do, and this will help you now in your diving back into the dating pool journey. We underestimate how attractive, how charming, how magnetic we all are. And you've got a big personality, Donald. Like you've got a big personality, you've got a lot of life experience. You're bringing a lot to the table, and I think you could literally lead with like, I'm a reformed conservative who goes to therapy and I cry in public. And I mean, I think that could work pretty well with you, especially in the Colorado dating pool, right? But
yes, it does, because I've used that more than once.
When I was in high school, I was at my buddy's house. We're smoking weed in his backyard, and his neighbor, who was real cute, sit back there with us. And my buddy, his house was an ingredient household like mine, so there was no food in it. And also his parents were like really weird about other people. It was a whole thing. So we're stoned to shit. I have the munchies real bad. And I'm like, great. And I'm so hungry. Do you have anything to eat? He's like, no, I don't have anything to eat. I'm like, come on, I'm so fucking hungry. You got to have some fucking food in this house. And his neighbor puts her hand on my knee and she goes, you can come to my house and have anything you want. And I went, nah, I'm just going to go to Burger King. And I left. And I didn't realize what I had done until later when Graydon texted me and was like, you're an idiot. She ended up hooking up with me because she was sad you left, but she, it was like high school bullshit of like, we're just horny teenagers and, we don't care. There's a penis and a pulse. And I was just like, fuck, and it was there are so many moments that are right in front of us that we don't realize are happening. And when we can overcome our cluelessness a little bit, and I'm a man with a microphone with a dating podcast. Like my advice doesn't really matter. The advice from other, advice from other women, and if there are any women listening to this, I would love your feedback on the things that I've said in this episode and others as well. I think that even just the fact that we have the understanding of why women would be hesitant to talk to us because we're men, or what risks are associated with talking to us, and the danger that is inherently associated with dealing with certain men and telling men what they don't want to hear and rejecting men. The sheer fact that we understand that, and whatever varying level of which we do, puts us further ahead of the game than a lot of other people who don't, right? Like, I think you and I speaking to each other now, we both have a pretty clear understanding of why women would choose the bear over the man,
Yes.
And that can be both an asset to us and a I don't have the word, and a limiting what's the fucking word I'm looking for? God damn it.
It can be both
an obstacle.
help and hindrance at the same time, because you can get in. I'll speak for myself. I get in my own head with this, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like a lot, because there's another viral video that went around of a woman who was videotaping an old man in like a checkout line who was like obviously like looking at her, right? Not doing anything other than like every once in a while he would like turn and obviously look at her ass, and then he would look away, and then he did it like 3, 4, 5 times, right?
Yeah.
Nothing happened. He just looked at her though, right? And I feel like in my own head space, it's because he was old that it was creepy, right? She was young, she was very attractive, and he was an old man looking at her, right? And I don't want to be the old man, right? I'm 39 years old, right? I get into a lot of situations where, like, I just stay away from younger women, just like, and that's a whole different conversation about all of that nonsense, whatever. Like,
everybody's allowed to like what they like.
That's the thing. That's the thing I tell myself every single time. It's like, I'm not going to chase 18, 19, 20, 21-year-olds. I'm not. But if I'm out and about and one sidles up to me and starts engaging me in conversation, I'm not going to tell her no either, right? Like, I'm not going to do that, right? But I'm not going to feel less awkward either about it, because I will very much understand that I am an old man.
Every woman that has ever slept with me after 2016 has been a direct beneficiary of the 37-year-old divorced German woman that I slept with for a couple of months. Because she taught me everything at that point, she taught me everything I know, and every single woman who has come after her has benefited from that. She's the first woman to ever stick a finger in my ass. Thank you so much for that. I'm not going to say her name, but
anyway,
cheers to you.
Yeah. Yeah, and if you aren't into that, get into that, because my God, it's so much fun. Believe me. It took me until I was 39 years old, but shit, what was I missing? But seriously, like, one of the things I've been learning on this experience, and I just want to make this really short, is people are into stuff, right? Yeah. You have no idea what people are into, right? And people are into things for all different kinds of reasons in all different places in life, and none of it is wrong, right? None of it is, like, if we are consenting adults and we want to have this experience together, ain't nothing wrong with that at all with anybody, right? It's the getting to that point that you have to be aware. I feel like I think it's just being aware, and sometimes I'm like, maybe it's a hypervigilance of mine of just being aware of people around me all the time, right? That guy's sexy, that woman's sexy, what's that guy's tattoo, what's that woman's, I'm just like constantly, like, all the time. And I don't know that it's necessarily a good thing that I'm like that. One of the things to work on.
I mean, I'm the same way. I'm the same way. My eyes are always everywhere, and I'm always, my eyes are always everywhere. I'm always in every conversation in the room. I think one thing that could be beneficial for you, especially since you're a person that loves to talk to people, is I do this all the time. Is like I eavesdrop constantly, and I love barging into people's conversations. And I there's a lot of social cues of, like, if they don't want you in your conversation, you can fuck off. But again, we're all desperate to connect with people, regardless if you want to fuck them or not. We all want that connection, and take the in if it's there. take the in if it's there, and then take the hint if they don't want you to continue on in the conversation.
That's the one for me, right? Like, there's always been these videos going around TikTok and social media of like, why doesn't the guy get the sign? I did the thing. Why didn't he pick up on this sign?
Because we're dumb.
Because we're dumb. Well, also a bit of ADHD, a bit of autism, forget it, right? But you get better the more you practice at it, right? But at the same time, like, I feel like so much of this stuff just comes down to communication. Like seriously, like, I talk to people and I'm very upfront with everybody about everything that's going on inside my head. This is how I feel. Mm-hmm. This is what I'm thinking. This is where I think we can be for right now. And I'll let you know if it changes, right? Mm-hmm. Same thing in every conversation, like public conversation. I'm having a great time. Let's keep talking, right? I'm not. I'm out.
I think
and there's just such a stigma about being able to have that, like, sorry, man, I'm not feeling this conversation. It's time for me to move on. It's time for you to move on, right? Like, that one is just like, I really wish we were more open and being able to communicate with each other that way.
There is something to be said about, we don't want to be rude to other people, right? I was on the subway platform. We got to wrap this up in a couple minutes, but I was on the subway platform a couple months ago, and this random woman comes up to me and she was like, oh my God, has anyone ever told you look just like Zach Galifianakis? And she happened to catch me on a bad day. I was not doing well, and I was like, yeah, people tell me that all the time, and I hate that fucking compliment. And the shock on her face when she was like, I'm sorry. And I was like, no. And then I apologized to her for saying something that was offensive to me, right? Like, and how could she have known? But I was like, it's fine. It's not your fault. You caught me on a bad day. I'm having a hard time, in a bad mood, blah, 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 blah. And then she was like, do you want to talk about it? I was like, no, I really don't. I'm okay. Thank you so much. And I put my headphones back in and I kept going. And, we don't owe everyone our vulnerability or our time or our energy, and no one owes it to us either. And that's why I think that there is really something to be said about taking a lot of risks and putting ourselves out there constantly. And like, there's nothing wrong with asking someone out or asking a lot of people out, as long as you do it respectfully. And if they say no, or if they give you their number and then they don't respond, or if you ask them out and they say no after you get the number, whatever, just take the no and move on from it. There's nothing, you're not going to, if their mind is already made up, you're not going to change their mind. You never know. You never know, but like, you don't know unless you take the shot. And, you're gainfully employed, you're going to therapy. You've got a lot of things going for you. You've got the daddy energy.
Don't listen to Seth Rogen.
And Joe Rogan.
Wow, yeah. Whatever. I don't listen to a Rogan.
Right. And, I think there's a lot going for you there. I think spend less time worrying about whether or not you're going to offend somebody by being interested in them, and just spend more time putting yourself out there and taking the risk, because I do think it will be appreciated by people. You have the right mindset when it comes to not being entitled or offensive, but now I do think that you're letting it restrict you a little bit too much. It's becoming a crutch to not put yourself out there with the people that you want to, and, lean a little bit further in the other direction and see what happens. And if that doesn't work, then, we can talk about that. But other than that, we've got 3 minutes left. Is there anything you want to cover before we go?
No, not really. Thanks for the conversation. I did want to say, I don't know, party thing. The reason I found you online was you did the thing where, like, go to therapy and don't listen to Joe Rogan, and it's the easiest way into a woman's pants you'll ever find. And I was like, I'm going to give this guy a follow. I like this.
There are certain ways to signal that you're safe, in my opinion. And one thing that I keep those to myself, primarily because I don't want to give those tools to unsafe people. That's something that I am personally hyper aware of, is like, I know the things that work for me that signal to other people. And like, it's also an energy thing, right? Like the really nice compliment that I get constantly is people are like, I would trust you with my drink. And that was a
huge one. one of the women that I'm dating, she would like literally hand me her drink and then walk away, and I'm like, I'm like this, and I'm like, that feels so good. It feels so good.
Yeah, and it's the same thing with strangers too, where you can kind of, those that get it. But the advice that I give is more so personal as much as possible, and how to like work with your own limiting belief systems, this and that, versus signaling your safety. And like, there are ways to do it, but you've got to do that work on your own to figure that out and know what really does it. Because it's like how therapy for certain people and therapy language can be weaponized. So I don't want to give those tools to people that don't deserve to have them,
Fair.
Fair. Well, Donald, I really appreciate your time and your vulnerability and your honesty and your story. And this was so much fun. And I look forward to hearing more about your escapades.
Thanks for having me on.
Well, you, sir, are a certified hot fat guy. And for all of our listeners, be sure to like and follow and subscribe to the show, and tell us what you thought of the episode. And if you want to be on the show, there is a link in our bio on our Instagram or TikTok, and it should be on the YouTube as well. You can sign up for an hour with me, and be sure to join the Discord and sign up on hotfatclub.com. All right, Donald, thank you so much. Thank you to everyone who listened. We will see you next time.
Bye.